Okay, so last time we just got done talking about the producer and the crew. Today we're going to talk about writing and story. And when we're discussing and talking about writing and story, it's probably the most important thing I can probably teach you this year in order how to have better video and good video. So something I want you guys to discuss and talk about with your groups today is, if we're going to be talking about writing and story, what is writing and why do you think it's vital to video? And now I want you guys to choose the person who loves writing the most in your group. And that everyone in your group probably hates writing, right? There's probably a lot of you in here that do not like writing. So try and find maybe the person that likes it or hates it the least, I guess you can say. But I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes to kind of discuss and talk about what writing is and how you can utilize that to make better video. Please let this be it.
This week on the news.
It was great. Thanks for asking. Absolutely no hangover for Von Miller so far this season after a huge postseason for him. The AFC Defensive Player of the Month for September. Such a hot start after such a quick offseason. What's behind it? How about the salsa, the cha-cha, the waltz, the foxtrot? That's right. A little time in the ballroom for Von Miller. Perfecting his footwork has helped him fly.
Situation. I hate
searching about the offense and what needed to.
All right, cool. Let's go ahead and bring it in. We're going to start today with Group 5. I'm going to start with you guys today. What is writing and why is it vital to video? Go for it, Thomas.
What writing is basically kind of like the base formation of what you're making. And the reason why it's so important is so you, like when you're making the same video, so that you know what you're doing and where everything's supposed to go, what's supposed to happen. Because if you don't have that, just going to fall apart.
Okay, cool. So fair enough. It's a structuring tool. That's fair enough. So writing is a structuring, if I can learn to spell correctly, I swear I can spell structuring. Structuring tool. Okay, anyone else? Go back to Group 3 back here. Who loves writing the most? Okay, go for it, Margaret. Okay, dialogue. So not only is it a structuring tool, but if individuals are going to be speaking and talking, it's a way for you to structure their dialogue. Okay, anything else? Okay, we can just even start just with this, unless you got something, Jacob.
Was used to record and create information.
Okay, find a way to document information. We'll do that rather than record, so that way we don't start getting that mixed up with what video does. Okay, it is definitely good for us to be able to do that. But I'm going to get even deeper on this. I'm going to go back to like what even is writing. Like your English teachers teach you how to do it all day long, right? But they never go over what it actually is. Because is this writing up here on the board?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it. What are you going to say?
You wrote something.
Okay, so I might have written something. Yeah, it's not legible, maybe not understandable. I guess you could say it's writing. Most people would say no, that this right here, right, is not writing. That's something my 14-month-old would do, right? Whenever I give him like a pencil or something like that, he's like just, or a crayon, and he just goes all over the place, right? Is he writing? I don't know. It depends on your definition of writing, right? So that's why I want to kind of clearly define writing. I think the reason why a lot of you guys hate and don't like writing these days is because A, you're forced to do it, and B, you don't understand what the point of it is. So something that you're constantly forced to do, and you have no idea what the reasoning behind that forcing you to do it is, will cause you to fight against it, right? So let me go ahead and try and start defining writing. So that way we can have a better idea and a better understanding of what this thing is and why I actually think it's probably the most important thing that you need in order to have good video. Yes, of course, you need a camera to record video, but it's almost not necessary to have a camera if you don't have writing. So here's what writing is. Writing is the activity or skill of marking coherent words on paper and composing text through a given language. Okay? Now, as I was putting this presentation together about a decade ago, actually it's not a decade ago. Yeah, it was close to a decade ago, 9 years ago. I looked up the definition of the word writing because I wanted to define it for you guys so that you guys really kind of understood it a little bit better. And so when I looked up the definition of writing, this is what came up, right? It's an activity, number one, so it's something that isn't required for an individual or a human to be able to do. Yet we want all humans to be able to do it, so that's number one. Number two, it's a skill. So it's something you have to do repetitiously in order to develop it, in order for people to understand what it is that you're doing. Just like a hammer. Like if you were to pick up a hammer and use that as a tool, first time through, you're probably hitting your thumb if you're hammering in a nail, right? Okay, the better you get with your accuracy, your hand-eye coordination, the more likely you are to hit that nail on the head and knock it right in without actually hitting your thumb. So it's a skill, it's something you got to develop more over time. And what it is marking coherent words on paper or composing text through a given language. So it's a communications tool. So if we don't know how to write, like if we're always using shorthand in our texts, and we're always trying to never necessarily formalize things, we're just trying to put stuff out there for ourselves, we're not really communicating with another individual. We're hoping the person kind of understands what it is that we're writing down, right? So to better make use of that skill, you have to practice using more things like punctuation, capitalization, and so on and so forth. Because the better an individual can understand the thoughts that are going on in your head, the more likely you are to do better economically, right? Because if you're able to communicate information without talking to people, great, awesome. You don't have to be there in order for them to be able to do a thing. And the more people you're able to do it with, the more likely you are to earn more income on, right? So that's the reason why writing becomes really, really important. But once I figured out where the word writing came from, that's when things started sparking in my mind. The word writing comes from the Germanic word rissen, which means to sketch or to draw. And that's when it all of a sudden hit me. Okay? Back 10,000 BC and so on and so forth, right? If you had a story, how would you want to tell that particular story if you couldn't communicate it orally? Draw it, right? If you remember, back before the Ice Age, we had people that went in caves, and what they do? They drew out stories up on walls. You'd start here, you'd move further on down the line, you'd keep moving down, and eventually, if you want to read the entire story, you'd wrap around the entire room. That's exactly what we do today with video, except instead, we keep the screen or the wall static, and we move the drawings around on screen. So we're actually writing with light, which is actually what the word photograph means. Photo means light, graphos means photos means light, then write, or graph means write. Light writing. There you go, close enough. Right? But that started to make sense that we're sketching out or drawing particular stories. So the better writer you are, the better you are with English, the better you are composing a text through a given language, the better you're going to be with a camera and composing visual images up on the screen. Which is why, by the way, the best writers are often the best filmmakers. Okay? Yes, mathematicians work on the back end of things for technology-wise, but for the most part, if people want to do really, really well, they need to have a very good understanding of communication and language. And this is where it really jumped out to me too. Okay? So we'll go with this, right? My scribbles are out of the way. Right? What is that? Okay, I'll even make it a little bit cleaner. What is that? An A, right? Okay, how do you know that's an A? Because Because I know my letters, right? Because I was taught that in kindergarten. Okay, why? How do you know that's an A? Like, what defines that as A? The way it's drawn out, right? The drawing itself defines what it is. I attach a sound to that specific drawing, right? What about this? What is that? A B, right? Cool. So I now have two different drawings. I have one drawing here, A. I have another drawing here, B. And now when I take a look at those individual drawings, I can attach sounds. Creepy little screen scrolling back up. I can attach sounds and communication devices to those particular drawings. Now what's really interesting is, what is this? Okay. What are these two drawings put together called? Ab. It's not AB. Why is it not AB? Because this is A, this is B, so if I add these together, it should be AB. But it's not, it's AB. Different sounds attached to two different drawings. This is what I can't believe we don't teach you guys. I literally can't believe we don't teach you this in English. But there's two different sounds that are attached to this particular word. Why? Because now this is becoming a drawing in and of itself. You take two separate drawings, you compose or put them together, and now you have a new drawing put together that has a different sound attached to it. Okay? If I started adding in another letter over here, okay, and I added this in, and now we have this as a drawing, how does that drawing pronounced? Cab, right? Even though this letter is C, right? It's weird because we attach different meanings to each different drawing. You rearrange the drawings, different meanings, different communication tool. Same thing with film and video. Different images, put one over the top of each other or put one right after the other, will change the way in which people interpret what happened before it, what's happening after it. And what's really cool is that I found out that when you actually take a look at something that doesn't seem to make sense, it actually does. Who wants to read out loud for me? Anyone want to read out loud? Go for it, Layla.
The whole thing?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Only smart people can read.
Okay.
I could not believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenon.
Yep. Correct. Keep going.
Power of the human mind. According to a research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters are in a word.
The only
Important.
thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. If you take a look at all these letters, they're all out of place, except for the first and last letter. Why? Because your mind, once they understand each individual letter, now starts to read a word and sees the picture of that word and attaches a sound to that picture. So individuals that have dyslexia, what happens is that your brain can't read the images fast enough. Doesn't mean that you're wrong or that you're slow. It just means your brain can't process the images fast enough, which means you're more likely to have a seizure, more likely to have some other things because your brain gets overloaded, right? But as people were going through and reading this, only smart people can read this, couldn't believe that I could read, or that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind, according to a research at Cambridge University. It doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, because if we did, it would take forever, but the word as a whole. Amazing, huh? Yeah, and I always thought spelling, see, I almost said sleeping, spelling was important. If you can read this, pass it on, right? So when your brain is processing things, it doesn't look at all the individual details that pop out. It'll notice it the more that you understand it. Now, if someone had never seen the word phenomenal, all of a sudden that word looks almost like pharmaceutical. So you would try and pronounce that word as you see it because you've never seen that word before. You haven't attached a sound or anything like that to that particular drawing or to that particular image. So that's the reason why your brain would kind of freak out a little bit at first. And that's the reason why I also said sleeping instead of spelling. Because I saw SL, my brain was reading it almost too fast, and it didn't process the first and last image, or first and last letters, to create the image and the outline of the image. Right? So if we can understand that video is like writing, where people are going to see first and last images. They're not going to see necessarily everything in between. You can start playing with it as a communication tool to give different people different information and different things, right? Because you can attach an audio track. This is the reason why everyone loves TikTok and music videos. Why? Because the audio track is already attached. All you have to do is play with things up at the top, and you can rearrange the way it looks, but you're not changing the sound that's attached to it. So it feels like you're creating something when really all you're doing is taking something someone else did and just adding your own little stuff over the top of it, right? Because it's easy. So it makes you feel like you're part of that particular group, part of those particular people, makes you communicate better, right? So that's why writing is important, okay? Writing is important because it allows us to communicate things and ideas through pictures, and allows us to communicate ideas without sound. You actually can figure out what those sounds are as long as you know what those sounds have been taught, or as long as someone taught those sounds to you correctly. You can interpret those sounds accordingly on your end. And it was how information was sent and processed up until the late 1800s, when we actually started to attach radio waves or radio frequency or record words and be able to play them back. It was the only way people could have understanding from New York to LA. You write something down on a piece of paper, you physically take that piece of paper to New York or to LA until you have the telegraph come out. Then you send a bunch of different sounds, beep, boop, beep, 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 boop, 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 beep, 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 boop, okay, that someone else can interpret on the other end, write it out, and then rewrite that page and kind of know what information someone is sending from one place to the next. Nowadays, you just pull out a camera and record someone doing those actions, and you send that information from one person to the other as long as there's a screen that can interpret that information. So when most people say that you're addicted to your phone, you're actually not addicted to your phone. I actually really disagree a lot with that statement. I agree more with the fact that people are addicted to getting information. And the phone is the byproduct of you getting that particular information because it's a communications device. Now the problem is humans aren't used to being hyperly connected and connected together. So you're going to get weird human interactions as a result of this. Okay? One of the things that ended up started to happen a little bit more, I gotta be careful as I dance around this particular news story. What we started finding out is that after Columbine in 1999, information amongst high school students started to be exchanged much faster, and you started to get more copycat crimes, high school shootings, quote unquote. Even though there were technically more quote unquote shootings at high schools pre-Columbine. You had individuals that were seeing information up on the screen, seeing how it was processed by the public at large, and individuals that were desperate for attention in particular areas started to say, hey, wait, I can do that. And so because that information was processed separately, because those that were in charge of communicating that information from point A to point B didn't understand the responsibility they had of how that communication should be interpreted and presented, ended up creating a lot of what we have going on today with there being a lot of, quote, high school shootings. Nothing really is original in the way that a lot of these kids try and do things. What they're trying to do is typically trying to reach out for attention. And they found that the individuals that could reach out for the most attention and get the most glory for it were individuals that were portrayed on the media and portrayed through the communication channels. And so you're seeing a lot of that copycat information because that's the way they're able to communicate ideas. They communicate it through pictures, they communicate it through sound. Nowadays, people are getting even crazier, right? Some people are trying to live stream these stupid, crazy things. Why? Because you can process information faster. It wasn't just you can write a letter and say, this is how I did something stupid before, and you can kind of be famous like me too, and then they send it off. Now it's as it's real time happening. And so because we're hyper connected together, and we can pass information from one person to the next, individuals are finding different ways to process information that could be vital to them in order to make their survival more important. It's the reason why typically individuals that feel the worst are the ones that act out the most. Usually it's a zero-sum game for a lot of individuals. It's not just high school shootings, it's drugs, it's alcohol, and so on and so forth. Typically you will not see A students really get into drugs unless they don't want to be an A student and they're sick and tired of all the pressure that's being put on them, or they have to maintain that pressure, and so they will reach out to try and find a chemical or biological way to continue to be at the top of their game. right? So that's why writing is important. Now we're writing with images, and that's what video is, which is why a lot of people tend to like this class, because it's the new way we communicate. Very rarely do we have to write stuff down on a piece of paper and pass it from one person to the next. It's from screen to screen, right? Snapchat, AirDrop, Instagram, social media, or like Facebook, Twitter, right? They all have some sort of video or picture component. So I often say writing is the foundation upon which the temple of video is built. Without writing, you wouldn't have video. There's no need to have video exist, okay? Because the original videos were cave drawings, cave paintings, pasted around a room for you to go through and walk through and see. Egyptian hieroglyphics, that was the way they communicated information. Pictures. By the way, we do the same thing today. They're just called emojis. Instead of taking the time to write out smiley face or I'm happy or that's awesome, find the smiley face emoji, click, send. Right? Communicating through images. Because writing, doing stuff like this, all this is a lot of pictures up on a screen that you then your brain has to formulate. And the faster your brain formulates it, the faster you're able to understand it, right? But some of us haven't looked or dealt with words enough to where we can process things faster and understand things better. Okay, this is the reason why we're actually working on a way to infiltrate individuals' minds. Like Elon Musk is working on, what was that thing that just came out? He's working on a neural capacitor, Neuralink, in order to create input-output waves that humans actually have. Right now, our input-output is basically 2 thumbs, right, in order for us to send messages. What if you could just think it and send it out? And the faster you thought it, the more information you can send, right? Everyone loves faster internet, slower ping time. What if you could do that with your human brain? Instead of your brain sending a signal down to your thumbs and have you type it into a screen, what if you could just think it? Or, like Siri, what if you could just say it? Because now it just has to go from the brain to the mouth. But Elon Musk is skipping the mouth part and just saying, hey, what if we could just pull stuff literally out of people's brains and you can actually just get that information out to everybody, right? So video is a huge part of all this. So this is kind of a review. We talked about where what the 5 major types of video are. We talked about how they're news, infomercials, music videos, television, and news, or television and film. But I want to break down what kinds of writing styles are in each one, because each one is a little bit different. So the way you come up with information and the way you section off that information and structure, which is what we talked about when you guys were answering at the beginning of class, the way we structure it, it becomes important. So let's start with news. Okay, this is old stuff. We've already kind of gone over this, and we've discussed and talked about this, but I'm just putting it up here again so that way you guys have a review. If you only want the new information, anytime it says major types of writing on down, that's new information. Anything above that is all review. Okay, because I still have people that are switching in and out of classes that might be missing, so I want to make sure that they're getting all the information they need to. So we talked about how news really is just new things that are happening. Right? It doesn't come from north, east, west, south, like a lot of people think it does. It just means new happenings. It comes from the Latin word nova. Okay? There are 2 types of writing that are typically involved with news. And those are the 2 types of writing we're going to be dealing with this year. You have news articles, which is what we do for BNN, contains recent information about an event or a place. Okay, something's either going on or something's happening at a particular location. And then you also have PSAs. This is going to be your first video project that you guys do in this class, and it'll be an individualized project. We actually start this in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks? That's when we're going to start our first video project. We actually start our first project here coming up very, very soon, like the next couple days. Okay, here's what a PSA is. First of all, the acronym PSA stands for Public Service Announcement. And here is what a PSA is supposed to be. The objective of an infomercial is to market a product, while a PSA is intended to benefit the public interest. And it benefits the public interest by raising awareness about an issue. Okay, so let's take, for example, trash. Okay, let's say there's trash around campus, right? There are 2 different ways you can approach this trash problem. You can talk about this new product that will help you pick up trash bigger and faster and try and sell people on that particular product. Or you can raise awareness that there's trash around campus and it needs to be picked up. We need to find a way to make sure it's clean. Now, our campus really doesn't have that big of a problem with it, not compared to a lot of other campuses. Why? Because you guys rock. You guys are OKB, right? So we want to be sure that when we're setting up our videos, we don't talk about the thing that's going to help help clear the campus. We want to talk about the process and why you should. And so when we actually start working on PSA projects, you'll see how that actually comes into play. Okay, how we talk about the background of how trash even gets to where it is, what the process is of being able to go clean it up, and where people should go. We're raising awareness about a particular issue. News, we're just commenting on things that are happening, right? Okay, Ezekiel Elliott takes the ball, runs down, he's at the 50, oh no, he's going to the 40, oh, breaks a tackle, runs down the field, oh, he's breaking away, he's running on his own touchdown, right? Okay, yeah, right, and I don't even like the Dallas Cowboys. So that's not even my team. Ezekiel Elliott's on the Cowboys, right? Or did he get traded? No, hasn't. Yeah, Jerry. Okay, cool. Still up to date on my football. But anyways, that was just giving you information about what's happening and what's going on. That's writing on the fly, right? So they're generating images, they're generating information to be communicated from one person to the next. So that's the difference between news articles and PSAs. Again, if I go too fast, feel free to pull out your phone and take a picture if you need to, or you can go back and take a look at this lecture online. It'll be available on our Haiku page for you guys to take a look at as well. Okay. What about infomercials? So again, top part is review. Under major writings, that's new information. Infomercials, we talked about how it's the blending of the words information and commercial. So you're giving information about what a problem might be, but you're advertising a product that fixes that particular problem. Okay, so you have two different types of writing when it comes to infomercials. This is going to be your final video for first semester. This will be after our music video because we're going to do 3 videos this semester: PSA, music video, and then an infomercial about the school. Okay. For the infomercial part of it, you want to make sure that you're figuring out the differences between describing what a product can do and having an individual discuss how that product helped change their particular life. Right? So when you guys do your promotional video for this high school or informational video for this high school, you're going to find ways this school helps individuals. Then you're going to find individuals who actually were helped or love certain things about this school and have them describe what it's about. Okay. My favorite description and definition is the word testimony. Does anyone know where we get the word testimony? That would be cool, right? Close enough, right? Let's just have it be the Bible. Why? Actually, we'll actually jump into that. Okay, it's fair enough. Anyone else? Okay. Testimony, right? Okay, so here's what a testimony is. It's a sworn statement saying that what is given or said about something else is indeed true. What used to happen back in the Greek and Roman, so the Greco and Roman time periods, pre-Bible, well, pre-New Testament, okay? You have individuals that would stand up in front of the Greek and Roman Senate, or whoever's in charge, the government, we'll put it that way. And what they would do is they would say that I'm telling you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Right? Basically that. The Senate didn't know, or the government didn't know, how to hold someone accountable, because what happens if that person's lying? Anyone can get up and say, I'm telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Right? So there was a way where you could actually believe people more if they gave a testimony rather than just a sworn statement. I swear I'm telling you the truth, because you can't prove, there's no course of reaction, there's no corrective course of action for an individual if they lie, if they're just given a sworn statement. You lied, right? So why not take a chance and lie? So when it comes to testimony, if you take a look at those first 5 letters, T-E-S-T-I, what individuals used to do, the men back in the days, would grab themselves, hold themselves, and say that what I'm saying is true, and if it's not, cut them off. Basically, I don't deserve any more sexual pleasure in life. So when you give a testimony, if you want to really believe someone is actually telling the truth, what they used to do is they used to grab themselves between the legs, pull their hand up in the air, and say, if it's wrong and you can find out that I'm lying, castrate me. That's where we get those first 5 letters. Testy, right there, right? Legit. Can you imagine today, in today's court, if you were found out you were lying, that all sexual pleasure was taken away from you if you were found out to be lying? A lot more people would start telling the truth. Men and women, mostly men, but women as well. If anyone found out that you were lying, they would say, no, sorry, you can go try and have sex with someone else, but you're not going to be able to have any pleasure, and it's not going to be pleasurable in any way, shape, or form. Why? Because you lied. That's how important the truth was back then. And that's why, by the way, when it comes to the Bible, I know it was just kind of thrown out there, this is why churches, They have you give your testimony, right? When you're about to be, quote, baptized, unquote, you typically want to stand up and give a testimony about how God has changed your life in some way, shape, or form, right? Because what you're saying is, if I'm wrong, I don't deserve any more pleasure in life. I deserve to be in hell. It's that serious, right? So you can imagine if this was put into our leadership in government today. If you're wrong, we're gonna castrate you and make sure that you're not like good anymore, right? Good luck having fun with someone else, right? So that's the reason why testimonies are really, really important. You want to find individuals that really kind of buy in. That's the reason why some of you guys that are in here, maybe a lot of you guys, got a testimony from some of my kids that were walking around that were like, dude, you need to join BNN. They know level 1 is rough to kind of get through, which is what you guys are going through, because we learn all this other stuff. But they know, because they've experienced in level 2, what it's like when you actually transition from 1 to 2. And then what it's like to transition again from 2 to 3. It's a way to kind of grow up. So that's the reason why some of you guys are in here are like, really? This is what we do in this class? Doesn't seem that good. If you stick through it, you'll see where it ends up going. Why? Because they have a testimony. They're saying that what they're saying is true. They're not going to lie to you about stuff. You'll get there. It doesn't start that way, right? Cool. This is why, by the way, words and understanding where they come from and what they mean are so fun. Because then when you actually use words that most people aren't used to, like esoterical, it's really fun just to see people go, what? And then have it mean exactly what it is that you actually intend it to mean, right? Music videos. Okay, we talked about how music videos come from the Greek word musa, which means muse. Okay, it's a visual form of the lyricist or of the song, of the music. Okay, there's 2 types of writing for music videos. You have script writing, which we'll spend a lot of time with here in a little while. Okay, and then you also have blocking. So let me note the difference between the two. Script writing is structuring or noting individual instances in a sequence of events. So you're going first this event, then that event, and here's what's going to happen in between. That's script writing. You're noting each one of those and how they proceed from beginning to the end. Okay. You can change your script around. You can change a lot of the formatting you can change scenes around inside of that particular script, but for the most part, the scene itself is self-contained. That's the reason why it's an individual instance. Okay, you have a bunch of events that happen, that correspond, and that develop over time. Right? Blocking is how individuals are supposed to move, or objects are supposed to move inside of those particular sequences. So I'll go over this here in a little bit. But when I start discussing and talking about my day, how am I going to move, or how am I going to decide to move from my computer to move to my podium? If I wanted to document that, what would that look like? How would you describe that? How would you describe the character? How would you describe the movement in that particular scene? Right? Because if you're going about your daily life and you think of your life as a script, right now you're in scene 3. Scene period 3, if you want to go with that. Next class period, you'll be in scene period 5. And you can see that there's time blocks that are associated with that. However, what happens inside of each of those individual periods changes. But you know that's a scene. Okay? And you have to move from one scene to the next. Right? Television and film also have these 2 items as well, script writing and blocking, except they have 2 more things that typically go along with it. Okay? We talked about how television comes from the Greek word telos, which means at a distance, and then the Latin word visio, which means vision or to see, often to a distance. So televisions bring stuff that's done far away, close to you, which is why basically the internet now is just a big, huge television. And you have a bunch of different channels. Channels are like web pages, websites to go to, and inside of those websites, they even have channels, like YouTube has channels, Twitch has channels, and so on and so forth. Okay? And then we talked about how the French word filmen meant membrane, because that's what the individual images used to be printed out on. Okay? But the 2 major types of writing that we were discussing and talking about, you can just copy-paste, script writing and blocking, same definition from the previous slide. So I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay, because it's literally the same definition from the previous one. You can just add it underneath here. The differences are these 2 for television and film. Okay, for television and film, you have dialogue. So dia means 2, or dios, 2. Okay, logos means word. So dia and logos, 2 word, 2 individuals are having a conversation together. That's what dialogue is. Okay, a monologue is mono, 1. Logos, word, 1 person talking and discussing things, that's a monologue. Okay? So dialogue is a conversation between 2 or more characters. And then you also have storytelling. And this is what we're going to be really, really focusing down on in the second half of today and for the next little bit, is exactly what is storytelling. Because storytelling is probably one of the most vital components inside of writing. So I like to, again, have hierarchy and structure and my understanding of how something works, because it's like, okay, why are we going to do the thing if that thing doesn't make sense in this particular thing? Let's get rid of it, right? Storytelling is a written or visual account, sorry, take two. A written or visual account of events, either real or imaginary, okay? And it's told for two purposes, entertainment and lesson or moral learning. You have to have both. Even in a dumb TikTok. If you're trying to tell a story with it, you're trying to entertain, of course. So anytime you guys are doing a video, your audience and you should be entertained by it. And you're also trying to tell a lesson or moral as a result of that entertainment. Okay? If you go back and watch The Simpsons, if you go back and watch Family Guy, if you go back and watch South Park, okay, I know I'm just using cartoons as an example here, but they will always, always, always entertain you and make you laugh and try and get you to think about something that has happened to learn as a lesson or a moral, right? If Peter's fallen down, right? Peter Griffin hurts his knee. Entertaining part is hilarious, just hearing him go, like just over and over and over again, right? That's the meme, right? Of him hurting his knee, okay? The entertainment part is him making the noise and the sound. The lesson or moral is don't hurt yourself. Stop messing yourself up. In a meme form, it's, oh, look, I screwed up. That guy shouldn't have asked that girl that, right? He fell down, hurt his knee, you send him that particular meme, right? Memes are the exact same way, by the way, in the same image, okay? Sad man, sad frog, Pepe the frog, okay? It hurts so much, so very sad. Neon cat, same thing, okay? There's always entertainment, but there's also lesson and moral learning. Neon cat constantly keeps going. It never stops. So when you want to stop, don't. By the way, Neon cat is Pop-Tart cat. If you guys, they're the same thing, right? Oh my gosh, double complete rainbow, right? The guy who's seeing a double rainbow that's happening, who's like really high on drugs and everything else, and he just goes, oh my God, it's so beautiful, because he sees two rainbows, right? It's probably high on whatever it is. Entertaining, but also lesson or moral. There's still a brighter side. You literally can be so far down in the dumps that you can still look and see not just one rainbow, one beautiful thing, two beautiful things happening and simultaneously. And the odds of that happening, very small. And the fact that he got to experience that, knowing that he would not experience, or he's experiencing something that very few individuals around the world have ever experienced, cool, now you're involved with that. Harlem Shake, same thing. Stupid little dance, waiting for the beat to drop, right? All of a sudden, you wait for the beat to drop, everyone starts dancing. Right? Out of just nowhere, the shot just cuts, right? It's a static shot, and then it's a straight cut into people having a fun time, right? Why? Because in the entertaining part is people dancing. The lesson or moral is wait for the beat to drop. Just wait for it. Continue to do your thing. Once the beat drops, have fun. But wait for the beat to drop. Because if you do it before the beat drops, you're going to ruin it for everyone else. And some people are like, I don't even think about this. Like, this is just something that comes naturally. I know. That's the reason why I'm trying to break it down. I'm trying to break it down so that way you can understand it a little bit better and be able to see how all these things interact in amongst themselves. Okay? So as I said before, the next thing we're going to move on to after this is storytelling. How can we tell better stories inside of video? Because if we understand writing and understand it as a communications tool, how can we utilize video to communicate entertainment and lesson or morals? And then not only can we use it to communicate lessons or morals, how eventually can we monetize that and make it so that way other individuals want to pay us to start really being involved with particular stories. So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes, again, to go over this, to discuss and talk with your groups. The question is this time, what are the 6 components of a story? And I want you to choose the individual in your group that is most likely to read a comic book, not see a comic book film, but actually read a comic book as your group's speaker. All right, give you guys 2 minutes. We'll be right back. All right, cool. So there's 6 possible answers for this. So we're going to go around to each group, and we're going to go in reverse order this time because group 1 always gets picked on for this stuff, right? So there's 6 possible answers. So we're going to go in reverse order, and we'll see if we can get the 6 components of a story. Group 6. We'll start with you guys in the middle.
So we have an introduction.
Okay, okay. So we'll go with introduction then. Okay, you guys are most likely to read comic books. Do you have any comic books? Do you guys have any comic books or no?
Myself,
No, and then no.
all digital.
All digital. Hey, Comixology, right? Okay. Group 5. What'd you guys come up with? Conclusion. Cool. Fair enough. Also, how many comics do you have? Do you have a lot or no? Okay. Cool. Fair enough. Group 4. I'll come back to you in just a second, Chase. Group 4. What'd you guys come up with? Climax. Cool. Fair enough. Group 3. Chase. Plot. Cool. Fair enough. Group 2. Rising action. By the way, do you guys have any comics or no? You do? How many do you have, and what do you read? Okay, cool. So DC. Awesome. Okay, cool. And you got none, and then do you have any over here? Any comics for you guys or no? No. Okay, what'd you guys say? What was your answer again? Rising action. Okay, cool. Fair enough. And then group 1? Setting. Cool. Awesome. Okay, thank you, Henry. Do you have any comics at all or no? No? Okay, cool. So you're talking to a dude here that has a comic collection that's worth over like 15 grand. And I've paid only $1,657 for everything. Because finding all this stuff right around 2008, before this thing called the Marvel Cinematic Universe came into existence, that's why I was starting to collect a lot of stuff. So I have a lot from previous years that are really good. So if you guys ever want anything, I have different stuff for you. But I have like the Amazing Spider-Man, Deadpool stuff way back in the day. What else do I have? My favorite is East of West. I can't believe that's not an HBO show, but hopefully it will be soon. You have East of West, and then, what was the other one that I have a lot of? Oh, Thief of Thieves, which actually was picked up by AMC, and so you might be seeing that from Robert Kirkland in a little bit. Robert Kirkland's the guy who did The Walking Dead. So if you guys didn't know that, The Walking Dead is a comic book, and then it transitioned into a TV show. Actually, most of the television shows, Outlander I think is one, most of them start out as comic books before they actually become TV shows, because that's where they test the market, is in the writing portion of things. Okay, so here's what we say. We say the 6 options or the 6 components of a story. You have to have a setting, a rising action, a plot, a climax, a conclusion, and an introduction. Right? 2 of these are correct. We got those, and we got those. The rest of these, the rising action, plot, conclusion, and introduction, those are all done if you're writing an English paper, right? This is what your English teacher teaches you. So I want to differentiate between writing an English paper and telling a story. Because here's my story, right? Okay, that's my story. Yeah, that's a great story. It's an amazing story. What happened? I walked out the door. Okay, let's just go with that. Mr. Sipe walks out the door. Does it have a setting? Yes. Okay, because the walking has to happen. Does it have a rising action? You could say the door opening. That's true. All of a sudden actually no, it's the walking to get to the door. You might be able to pull that off. Does it have a plot? Because it has to sequence, right? I mean, if you really want to break it down, you could say Mr. Sipe took his first step. He walked, he pushed open the door, he walked out the door. But even then, that word plot actually is broken down. There's things that happen inside that plot a little bit further. Was there a climax? Open the door, cool. Was there a conclusion? Okay, or you could just say he went out the door. That could possibly be a conclusion, but is the story still going after that? Because if it is, then there's not necessarily a conclusion, right? Okay, introduction. Did I introduce myself and what's happening? No. So that's one of the things I want to differentiate between myself and English teachers. I am not an English teacher. I did not go to school to teach or to teach other individuals how to write and do stories and so on and so forth when it comes to the English language. Okay? What I did is I went to school for how to tell stories. And so this is what we ended up coming up with and what I walked out of school knowing when it comes to stories and components. And feel free to break this down, because I've had people try and go at this for a few years now, and there are people that haven't been able to come up with good responses for these things not being accurate. So here's what you would need. 6 basic components of a story: setting, characters, events, development, climax, and resolution. Okay? We seem to be going along these lines, and I'm going to try and prove that point to you as I try and tell you the story about my day, so that way you can kind of see how things kind of shake out. So when you're trying to tell someone a story, even if you put it up on Instagram or Snapchat, and you utilize those particular things, you're taking a look at a setting, you're taking a look at characters, you're seeing something happen, how it started and where it ends. You're seeing the climax as that starting and ending point happened, and then the resolution is what comes as a result of it. It never actually concludes, it just resolves that particular ending. And so I'm going to define what those are here in just a second. But before I do, I want to review what a production is. So again, this is review for those of you that don't remember. We talked about how a production is the action of making or manufacturing something from separate components. And we also talked about how a story is a production. So if you're going to bring something forth and you're going to take a bunch of these different components and toss them together, you have to first figure out what these components are. Okay? Because if you can figure out how to just switch up these components, you can actually tell stories in one particular direction, and then you can take that same story, apply it in another area, and change it up to the point where it looks brand new. And so we're going to talk about how we can do that. And by the way, you guys know how to tell a story. You do it every day. The trick is being able to write it down as opposed to just capturing it and putting it up on your Snapchat or your Instagram and so on and so forth. Okay? Which, by the way, YouTube's doing stories now. So weird. Yeah, I don't know how many people use them, but you can use them. So let's define these words. Let's define these different components. Okay? First component, a setting. A setting is the place where something happens, or where something is situated, and where something occurs. It comes from the Germanic word sets in, which means to literally sit in. So if there is not space, if that does not exist, space-time actually, and we'll discuss the time portion of that here in a little bit, you do not have a story. And that's really, really important, because if it doesn't exist inside of this area, it can't exist. And that's a weird thing for people to think about. Like, for example, space is expanding, right? If we go into science and talk about astronomy. Astrology is a little bit different than astronomy. When we talk about astronomy, space is expanding. What is it expanding into? We don't necessarily know, because we can't see on the other side of it. Okay, it's almost like an event horizon. The best guess is that space itself is expanding into time. And as space expands into time, those individuals continue to converge, creating new things to happen. But in order for something to exist in the first place, you have to have the space. So that's where setting comes from. You have to have a space in which something takes place. So when I talk about my day, the setting for my day is this classroom. As far as you guys know, to your knowledge, besides looking at your phone and everything else, if you're just observing what is currently happening, nothing is happening on the other side of these 4 walls. If someone is watching this video or watching this lecture, and they're taking a look at something that's happening inside of the box or the frame that they're seeing on their screen, as far as they know, nothing else is happening to them in their room, because they're not paying attention to that. It's focused, it's observable. That is the setting that they're in. Now what's cool is with video, you can take people to different settings without them ever having to leave. So I can show you what it's like. Actually, what we're actually thinking about doing is I have a student who's literally flying to New York to get footage from ground zero for 9/11 to bring it back for our show. That's literally a thing that's happening. And I just told about it today. Okay? When she goes and flies and does her thing to go out there and go film, she's going to be bringing a setting back here to you to show you what it's actually like during this particular time period and what is transpiring over the next 2 weeks as we get closer to coming up on the 18th anniversary of when the Twin Towers fell, right? She's literally taking you to a setting that you yourself have not been to, or you cannot be at this exact moment in time. Might have been there before. Okay, cool, that's a little bit different. But she's bringing it to you. So if I'm telling you the story about my day, I have to bring this classroom to life to people. Okay? Now, when I start talking about this classroom, there's a lot of different things I can describe. I can describe the brick wall as opposed to the plaster wall. Okay? I can talk about how I have a screen up at the front of the classroom and I have like other stuff hanging up, including a banner on the east side of my classroom. I can talk about it left and right, north, south, east, and west. I can talk about the blinds and windows. Or I can just say my classroom and leave it up to the viewer or the person who is listening along to define what classroom actually means. Okay? So when you're setting up a setting, you have to set up a space in which a story exists. If you don't set up that space, it doesn't exist. That's the reason why when you pull out your phone in order to add to your Snapchat or to your Instagram, you always want to show where you're at first. It's a natural human instinct because we know that things can't take place, stories can't take place without a setting. Second thing, characters. It's the person or persons inside of a setting and a story. It doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It can be a thing. It can be an animal. Whatever it is, it's the subject of whatever it is that you're documenting. Okay? I don't necessarily like to use the word person, but it fits better for the Greek definition of the word, so that way you can understand it a little bit more. So the word character actually comes from the Greek word character. Ironically, the only difference is there's no C in the Greek language. That's the reason why it's K for kappa. Okay? And a character is a stamping tool with distinctive qualities, which means that anytime you introduce a character or characters into your story, they need to be different than the other character or characters. This is what upsets me the most about high school, and it upset me a lot as I was going through it in high school. I don't get people's need to be with other people so that way they feel the same. When you yourself are very, very, very unique and very different. Each and every single one of you has a different stamping tool, have different distinctive qualities. The better you can be as a result of the people that you're around, the more, not necessarily diverse, but the more the people you surround yourself that have more experience, the better unique version of you that you are going to be. Okay? If you're constantly around the same group of friends your entire life growing up, you don't gain enough experiences outside of those group of friends to feel confident when you split up and move away. Okay? This is also like helicopter parenting, right? Parents that constantly are around their kids and trying to make sure that everything's fine for them. When their kid goes off to college and now they're a legal adult and they can't tell the government what to do with their kid anymore because the kid's an adult now, that kid can't function and freaks out and wants to move back home. Conversely, if you have really good parents, those kids want to get up and move out because they want to experience new qualities and new things and so on and so forth, right? Because if you gather more experiences, the more likely you are to survive, to put food on your plate, to go through a day, get up and do it all over again, right? So that's the reason why finding those people that are really good at going out and having unique experiences are the best people to be around. They won't want to be around you for too long because if they're around you for too long, it holds them back. If it holds them back, it means that they're not growing. If they're not growing, they're never going to be better. So you want to learn how to best move in and move out, how to date individuals as opposed to having longer-term relationships in high school and so on and so forth. Because eventually when you do settle down, that person is going to go with you and you're going to go with them. But you still have your own worlds to rotate in, right? That's why characters are so important. So by the way, the best thing you can do in high school if you want to have fun and have a lot of good friends isn't to just hang out with the same people. It's to literally go out and be you and find the people that want to be around you because you're unique. By everyone being unique, that means everyone's the same. So there's kind of that label attached to it. But don't try and be who you're going to be. If you're the Christian kid, don't necessarily hang out with all the other Christian kids. If you're the gay kid, don't hang out with a bunch of people who are also gay. Like, find other individuals across the campus. Literally, find individuals that are complete opposites of you and be friends with them. That's myself and Miss Parsons, by the way. It's really hilarious because we actually don't agree on a lot of things. But like the first thing I'm going to do when my kid gets old enough is to put him in her class because she can teach him things that I can't because I have a very, what's the word I'm looking for? I have a very, not strict, I have a very good understanding of the world as I see it. She is very good at bringing new experiences to those two individuals. And so usually the joke between the two of us is I'm more like the patriarchy, she's more like Mother Earth. That's usually the joke between the two of us. But it's so good because we're so vast and so different. We argue all the time. It's great. Like there was one time where I was like going to yell at her because I'm like, this is really stupid. I can't believe this person's saying that. But instead I said, can you please help me understand this? Because I don't understand this. Why can someone do this thing this particular way? Because I don't get it. My mind is stuck. If you change the way you go into that and you allow an individual to kind of open up your experiences a little bit, allows you to have a better understanding of you, and it allows you to understand why it is that you like the things that you do. Allows you to understand a little bit more yourself. So characters, okay? Those stories. Events and development, okay? This is where you guys, if you put these two words together, you get the word plot. But if you take that word plot apart and extract it, there's two different things going on. First thing, event. Events are things that are happening to or around someone or something. So it's the thing that is currently actually happening. It comes from the Latin word evenire, and it means to come as a result of or to happen. Something can't come as a result of or happen unless it got pushed there in the first place. And that pushing part is a transition. And that transition is the development. Because development is the telling of an event that constitutes a new change in something or someone. Okay? So, for example, I walk into a classroom. That's an event. The development is I walk into a classroom and stand at the podium. That and stand at the podium part is the transition. It develops. Why am I standing at the podium? Because I'm about to deliver a lecture. See how it continues down the line? The development allows you to move from one event to the next. And how you transition becomes very, very important. It comes from the French word, by the way. The word development comes from the French word développer, and it means to unfold or to unfurl. So even if you're creating something in After Effects, and you're creating all these lines that are fading text in and out and so on and so forth, okay, you have your key frame. This is what's going to happen here. This is what's going to happen here. How is this going to change from here to here? That change is the development. Those 2 points are the events. And so if you realize that your font is the character, the setting is the camera event that you're creating inside of After Effects, now you understand how you're telling the story and why you're telling the story the way you're telling it. Okay? Because eventually this is all got to build up. Okay? So as the course of my day, I have me, I have a classroom, I have students. Okay? I'm just using that word as a catch-all rather than individual names, because I'm still working on names, and individuals and trying to understand them. Okay? As a result of my teaching, what develops, in theory, it's supposed to be learning. If I'm actually a teacher and I'm actually teaching, learning should be happening on your end. And not only that, it shouldn't just be happening on your end, it should be happening on my end. That's the thing a lot of teachers forget about, is that as they teach, they're supposed to be learning themselves about things they didn't even realize that they actually knew, because they're talking about it, they're developing it as they're teaching it. Okay, last one. Last five and six, last 2. Climax and resolution. You got to be going somewhere with your story. Okay, if I told you about the story about my kid and how he walks around the house, and when he was walking around the house, he saw a cupboard, and then he saw the cupboard, and then he opened up the cupboard, and it's like, what's in this cupboard? And then he started pulling out Tupperware, and I'm like, Brayden, don't do that. Why are you doing this, buddy? He goes, eh. And I'm like, what is going on? And then he's just like, oh, I'm going to keep doing this. And I stop right there. You're like, yeah, what the hell's the point? Okay, why are you telling me about your kid pulling stuff out of the thing? Now, I could tell you the whole reason why I told you that story is so that way you know that it's missing a climax. And that makes sense now why I told the story. But if I didn't get to that part to tell you, that's the reason why I'm telling you that story. There's no need to tell that story. So the climax is the most intense, exciting, or important part of something else. This is why it's typically used in a sexual term. Okay, when you get to that point of, quote, climaxing, unquote, that is what they're discussing and talking about. Okay, they're talking about the most intense, the exciting, or important part of something, right? When you take that hit of a particular drug, when you get drunk, quote unquote, that's climaxing. That's getting to the most intense or exciting part of it. Unfortunately, what comes as a result of that, the resolution, can be really bad sometimes. Okay, depending on your situation. It's very situational. Like if you're in high school and you end up boinking with someone else, resolution of that is you have a kid. If you're married and you end up boinking with someone else, the resolution of that could be a kid. But completely different experiences, right? Because of the events that lead up to it and what the climax entails for the individuals that are going to follow, for the resolution that follows, I should say. Okay. Last night, Mr. Bowen and I always go out and play trivia, typically on Tuesdays. We were actually one of the top teams in Southern California. We don't like to tell too many people this. We actually were one question away from winning $1,000 and being the Southern California champions, and then being put in the top 10, for Southern California, and then being take 2. We were one question away from being in the top 10 in the nation as a result of our trivia playing, and we were invited to play at the Nationals in LA. We actually beat 4 former Jeopardy champions as a result of some of the stuff that we do. So the actual result, I think, for the National Trivia Challenge or whatever is like $100,000 for the winners. So like we know our stuff. But anyways, on Tuesday, last night, I saw one of the saddest things that I've seen actually in a while. We were out playing trivia at this particular establishment that is less than 15 minutes away from here. And there was an individual that was very drunk, like very drunk. And was constantly trying to yell out answers and stuff. That guy was in his climax, okay? It was intense, it was exciting, it was important. Because, dude, seeing a drunk guy and a drunk person walk around, you guys know, I mean, you should know if you don't. They can be a little cray-cray, right? They have no filter, right? It was interesting. But what made it more interesting and more intense, actually more so than normal, he was in a wheelchair. And so watching a drunk dude in a wheelchair trying to go to the bathroom and trying to go to the men's room and having to be helped out by people was one of the weirdest experiences of my life. Because it's like he can't do what a normal person would do if they were drunk and needed to use the restroom, right? He can't either vomit up stuff because he went too far with climaxing, and he can't really just go use the restroom because he's got to somehow get out of his wheelchair quickly, right? So it's really interesting to see how the climax of that story changed and transitioned, because it could have been that, but then I realized, oh no, the climax actually is really sad. The most intense, exciting, or important part of this particular story isn't him getting drunk. That wasn't like the amazing part of it. The most intense, exciting, or important part of it was watching him and knowing that he's doing this because he does not like where he is in his life. And so even though it's sad, it's still intense. It's still important. It is exciting. It's not happy exciting, but it is exciting in the fact that you know that, oh crap, this is not going to end very well, right? So anyways, it's really interesting because it depends on what type of story you're telling, and we'll get to that in the second semester. But the Greek word, the word climax comes from the Greek word climax, which means to climb a ladder. So the best part of my day where I'm teaching and you're learning is that you guys learn something new. You're not just learning about stuff that you might already know, but you're gaining new knowledge that you're adding to your experiences that is helping you become more creatively and uniquely you. And then as a result of that, you're going to go take that information, maybe not that you learned in here, and maybe not apply it to video, but apply it to other places in your life. Like figuring out why your parents and you don't get along, right? Because I just got done talking about characters and stuff, and you might realize, oh crap, my parent's a helicopter parent. like, oh no, what am I going to do with that? So it's taking different experiences to become a better you, okay? And by the way, you'll notice in my class, typically the individuals that are better at doing that not only enjoy this class better, but also have way more fun and do better work because they realize, oh, it's about the experience as I'm going along and the end result, not just turning in a test or doing well on a test and so on and so forth, okay? And so the resolution is a firm or direct decision as to do or not do something with an explanation of why, even if that explanation of why is because I said so or because you don't need to know. That's still an explanation, right? It allows the story to resolve. It allows things to loosen, okay? It allows the release of tension, right? So when I was thinking about that dude last night, all I kept on thinking about was, how is he going to get home, number one, and number two, what's going to happen the next day? Like, okay, this resolves out. He has to go back to being sane, right? He can't be drunk anymore in that particular story. He's got to go back to being sane. How is that going to resolve? Is he really going to finish his problems, or is his problems still there and now he just feels physically as bad as he feels mentally and emotionally, right? So, say that again? Yeah, you could try. Eventually you could black out. Hopefully you end up dying, right? Same thing with drugs, right? I'm going to take a little bit more. I'm going to light up. Take a little bit more. Take a little bit of the edge off, right? Until eventually you take off too much of the edge and you don't know where you are or what's happening, and people are taking advantage of you in ways that you don't want to be taken advantage of, okay? Yeah, it's sad that people go down that road, but you need to understand why people go down that road. Doesn't mean you avoid it completely. It means you go, hey, why is this road do people like to go down it, right? Because the more you understand their resolution and why they decide to do something, right, allows you to decide, hey, is that something for me? And it's sad if it is in that case, because you can be doing a lot more, but hey, it sounds really horrible, but I'm not your parent. I'm only responsible for you when you're inside this classroom during this time period. I wish you would take care of yourself, but I can't force you to, right? So then when it comes to my story and the story of my day, the resolution is you actually applying something new. So not just learning about things, not just learning something new, but then actually using it in some way, shape, or form, okay? So those are the components of a story. And that's why a story is important, is because the better you understand those 6 things, the more likely you are to tell a better story, the more likely you are to engage your audience. Now, how do these things go forward? I have like 3 more slides and we're done. Okay, it's just kind of the phases of the story. Most of you guys probably already know this, but I'm going to expand on it just so that way you can understand how you can literally scientifically plot out a good story and not be a good writer. If you're a mathematician, you can plot out a story that you want to tell. And it's also how we can do this not only in our news world, but politically, and also even with your friends on your Instagram, Snapchat, and so on and so forth. So the first thing you got to do, Act 1, it's typically called the beginning. Okay, so you have beginning, middle, and end. It's 3-act structure. I actually prefer the 4-act structure, and I'm going to explain what Act 4 is, but it's not necessarily required. Just typically the best stories have 4 acts. So in Act 1, the setting is established. Okay, we establish where the story is going to take place. Star Wars does this extremely well. Literally the first slide you see after you see the intro credits, you literally see a black space, a black frame, with the words, "A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away." And the first thing you see is bum, 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 bum. You see a bunch of stars and you hear the music. Setting up the setting, taking you to a place that doesn't exist in our world. Right off the bat with just 1 sentence and 2 shots, right? Very, very well done. So you want to establish the setting first. Then the next thing you want to do is introduce the main characters. You want to tell us who the story is about and why it's about these particular individuals, okay? The story of Star Wars is not Luke, Leia, and Han. It has always been about R2-D2 and C-3PO and the experiences that they went on. They just happen to be owned or utilized by the Skywalkers, the Solos, and the like if you go back and watch the prequel trilogy, the Emperor, and so on and so forth. It literally is the story of 2 droids. Star Wars is not the story of Luke, Leia, and Han. So people that are upset about how Episode 8 went and so on and so forth, okay, sorry, but just so you know, it's not that story. That's one of the reasons why I think J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson kind of have gotten it wrong with this new trilogy. They keep on concentrating on new characters, and they're not telling the story of R2-D2 and C-3PO and the different experiences that those individuals go through. They're concentrating more on the new characters or the old characters because they're trying to play to an audience, right? It's one of the things that Marvel didn't do with their cinematic universe. They concentrated on characters. Ant-Man, Thanos, Captain America, so on and so forth. Okay? Typically in Act 1, 2, you have a main problem loosely established, right? You have a bunch of different events and stuff go on, and you establish a problem. But it's the main overall problem isn't always identified right off the bat. You can add in the main problem later on down the line. Like again, I like to use Star Wars as the example. The first problem is that, oh my gosh, these 2 droids are being chased. That's the main problem when they start out with. But the real main problem is, oh my gosh, this empire is trying to take over things. It came as a result of these 2 droids who were being chased, right? So that's what you got to think of when you start thinking of films is, okay, what's happening, where are we at, and who is involved? What's the problem? What are we setting up here? Usually this is established within the first 10 to 15% of a film, okay? Second part, the middle, okay? This is Act 2. In order to transition from Act 1 or the beginning to Act 2, the setting now has to be well established. So if you're starting to move back and forth and people understand and get a feeling of where certain things are taking place and how they're taking place, that's how you know you're in the middle. Until you reach that point, you're not really in the middle of the story. Okay? Other settings can be introduced and used. Main characters are usually fleshed out and you can become emotionally attached to them, and we'll talk about that next time on the next presentation and the lecture that I give about characters and you and what makes you a unique character and how you can create unique characters that are not even close to being like you. Okay? But they're fleshed out and they're emotional. Typically you can identify with characters and you have a very, very good understanding of what those characters do and who they are and why they're making the decisions that they're making, but you don't care about why they're making the decisions they're making. You care about whether or not the person is doing what they're supposed to be doing or not. Okay? Typically more side problems are introduced. You have your side characters and so on and so forth. Other problems may, it says may, but it's supposed to be may exist. Goodness gracious. Typo. Other problems may exist, okay? To give background to the main problem, but they're not important, Okay, and then you have the action or the journey rolling along and becoming engrossing, right? If you go the video game route, GTA 5, establish San Andreas, establish your 3 main characters, and Michael, Franklin, and Trevor. Then give them issues and problems. Each one have their own different stories. Have side quests or side missions, because that's where more problems are introduced. That way people can do things, and that helps move your story along. Okay, same thing. Red Dead Redemption 2. It doesn't matter. Call of Duty, Fortnite, all these games. Set up a setting, and drop in people. Have them push towards a particular goal, but you can have other stuff happen as they're pushing towards that goal. And then once you push to that goal, tell us what ends up happening as a result of this. Okay, and that's where phase or Act 3 comes into play. Okay, so we're talking about settings. We go back and forth between settings. We have main stuff established. Like I said, the main problem now should be identifiable in the middle. If you're trying to identify the real main problem, like if in Star Wars, if they said, oh no, the real main problem is actually this emperor, and you really introduce him in like the last 10 minutes of the film, it's like, okay, wait, what? Why did I spend all this time watching this film? You could have just told me that earlier and started at a different point in the story, right? So you need to establish the main problem by the middle of your story, okay? And then last thing, Act 3, the ending. Here's what typically tends to happen. By the end of a story, even a Snapchat story, the setting is now a character in and of itself, okay? I like to use the phrase, distinguishing marks are emblazoned in our minds, because instead of just saying, it's this magical world where wizards can go to and it's like a school and stuff like that. Like if I start explaining that, you're like, no, that's Hogwarts, you idiot. Like, correct, you have a word that describes that particular setting and area now. Now when someone just says the word Hogwarts, all of a sudden it's now a character. You don't just have a setting anymore. You have this place that is this thing that you are a part of and that you understand just as well. VMHS, Vista, you have a very good understanding of this character, right? The school. It has distinguishing marks that have been left in your mind. If someone says Mesa, like you have distinguishing marks left in your mind. Mesa here means something completely different than someone who lives out in Utah and actually would see a Mesa, right? Which is completely different than individuals that lived on a street called Mesa, right? So settings become characters if they've been around long enough. And that's typically as you get closer towards the end of your story, which by the way, if you're a freshman, you don't really understand the setting yet, right? Because you're in the beginning. The middle, your sophomore and junior years, that's where you start to understand the setting a little bit more. Seniors, by the end of your senior year, Vista means something. It's a character to you. And it either lived up to the hype or it didn't, right? And you have those marks left on you that you will take with you now to a new place. And if it lived up to the hype, cool, you're going to believe it when another school says, here's what we are, here's what we do. If it didn't live up to the hype, the next place you go to, you're going to be like, are you really? Is college really that good and much better than high school? Okay. So by the end, the setting kind of becomes a character. Then not only that, main characters are self-identifiable, which means that you can see a bit of yourself in every single main character, right? Doesn't matter who the main character is, you know that you can relate to them in some way, shape, or form, even if that relatability is that you hate them, right? This is what the Kardashians are extremely good at. This is what our current president is extremely good at, okay? You feel like you're part of the story. Most of you have never met either of them. Some of you don't want to meet either of them, right? But you feel like they're a part of your story every single day. All you have to do is cut off that channel, right? Because you've never actually physically met them. All you have to do is literally cut that off. I had this talk with another teacher because they don't like either of those individuals. Cool, cut it off, don't talk about it. But all these other people fall, who cares? You have your own story, concentrate on that, right? Are they actually affecting your story day in and day out? Yes, because it's in the newspaper that I read. Okay, cool, write and complain to your newspaper then. Like, do something about it. Don't blame the people and the things. Be upset at the people that follow them, not the person that's trying to lead, right? So these main characters, you understand a little bit more about yourself as a result of those individuals being where they're at. The main problem as well as others are typically resolved because if you leave a problem open, people are like, wait, hold on, why? That doesn't make any sense. So the main problem has been made clear and concluded. Other problems may exist. I did it again. Man, right? It's always with the word may. It like self-corrects to my, apparently. Dude, this teacher needs to get his act under control. Horrible teacher. 2 out of 5. Give him more than 1 star because at least, he puts some effort into his lectures. Okay. Typically, the other problems still may exist to give the background to the main problem, but the main problem should be tied up. So like the side quests, right, in video games that you do, you can still do those, but they're not needed for you to actually complete the game, right? It's just something for you to do inside the world because you like living inside the space, right? Climax is reached and the resolution has been presented. Boom, you can go home, right? End of Star Wars. Everyone gets a medallion, or not everyone, but Chewie, Han. Actually, no, Chewie doesn't. That's the controversy. Han, Luke, Leia. Oh no, Leia's the one giving them. So Han and Luke. Jeez, man, I suck at even knowing what's going on in this film. Han and Luke get medallions. Everyone cheers and claps and blah 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 and so on and so forth. That's the end of the story, right? Most people would say yes. That's the end of that particular story. Cool, fair enough. But if that story takes place in a much larger universe, or if that story is supposed to help us get to another story, that's where Act 4 comes into play. And so I am a very, very big proponent of when you get to the end, it should cycle either back to where it started, so that way people can go and decide and if they want to relive that journey over again and it becomes very cyclical, or that ending has to allow people to cycle up to the next level. And so this is something that not a lot of people hear or talk about. Like when you write your term papers, or not your term papers, just your essays for class and stuff, most of the time, most of you guys write your stuff. I know because I've read it. I read the Junior Reflective Essays last year. And every single time, because I know you guys write those 2 weeks in advance, 3 weeks in advance. Everyone writes them the night before. Okay, I know pretty much every single time the students that had the worst problems, they would just start typing and then they would just stop. And they wouldn't, like, it's like, why are you stopping? Like, continue on. Oh no, I hit my 1 page because I don't want to do this. Okay, cool, well then I'm going to mark you down because you might have hit 1 page. Cool, you hit that critical point, but you just stopped. Like, don't just stop, continue going forward. Wrap it around to the beginning, right? And your conclusion, give me a reason why you were alluding to certain things at the beginning and how this all ties together. So that way when I take a look at your paper, I go, oh, they connected that to that to that to that, and that's why they mentioned that at the beginning. Right? It's not stream of consciousness. It's not like you're live streaming stuff as you're typing things up. It's we're going to connect these things. So that's the reason why I call it Act 4. Okay. Some people will say the middle needs to be split and stuff. I actually call Act 4 what's called the cycle, because by the end of the story, the main character should have experienced an internal change in some way, shape, or form, thereby being alluded to for the viewer to go back and to have reflection. So it's either you as the individual writing or me as the individual reading this story. I can reflect and go, oh wait, that's how it ties into me. Right? Because you can always stop and conclude that particular story and just leave it and be like, okay, cool, I'm done. But if you can find a way to cycle it to either back to the beginning or cycle it to the next level or make people want another level, that's how you know you've been doing things really, really well. Okay? So you'll start to see this a little bit more on BNN this year, where instead of just, okay, that's all the time we have for you, stay classy, Broncos, boom, it ends. We want to try and show people, yeah, we're done for the day, but that's not done. We have other stuff that we're doing. We're cycling it to the next day. And so typically that's why they've decided to start showing people hanging out in the corner, because there's more than just those 2 people on screen. There's like 8 or 9 people in the room, okay, as those individuals are working on stuff. Because we found that trying to tell more of that story with the announcements, it tells more of your story. And if you start seeing more of you and start seeing more of the story that you want to be involved with, and you can see that story is actually being enacted out on campus, and it's not like what everyone else says it is, then you can start to see how that kind of starts to play into things. But if we lie about it, we lose you, right? Because you don't, as we talked about before, lying about it and making people think that you're telling the truth and then they find out that you're actually not, worse than just not telling the truth. Okay? So typically with Act 4, we want to find out what caused that main character to have an eternal change. Okay? With Star Wars, the way they kicked it over to the cycle is, yeah, they're all done, but what are those people going to do at the end that are celebrating this? Well, it turns out that Han went somewhere else, and so they kicked it off with Episode 5, how they cycled it back around to the start of a new story. And instead of just going forward with the story, they went out. which is why everyone loves Empire Strikes Back either as much or more than Episode 4. Okay, it's also the reason why Episode 6 doesn't necessarily work as well as Episode 4 and 5. And 1, 2, and 3 definitely don't work because it's difficult to try and do a cycle because people don't understand there's a different story being told, right? So trying to cycle that story as much as possible is good. It's not required, but it's good. Okay, so typically this is how your story will look. Okay, here's an example, and that's the last slide I have for you today. Here is how your story will look. Okay, you'll have a setting. You'll start out with a setting here. You'll build in characters. Typically stays at different planes. Then you'll add in an event right off the bat. Okay, typically you'll see action films start out this way. Boom, big explosions, other stuff, right? They just drop you in and then something's happening, right? Then you'll kind of calm down a little bit. And eventually you'll be brought back up. And as you're being brought back up to the middle of a particular story. Okay? Once the middle of that story happens, it's a very slow descent down because they're trying to give you more background to try and push you forward. So it's like a boom, bump, boom, bump, boom, bump, and so on and so forth. Usually in a 2-hour film, Act 1 is about 30-ish minutes. Act 2 is typically about almost an hour, like 45 minutes to an hour, where you're just trying to learn more about these characters and this backstory. So you'll get this event, then this event, then this event, and this event, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. But eventually, something will cause an event to change, and all of a sudden there's a push forward. Like, oh my gosh, I have to get this thing done, right? If you want to take Lord of the Rings as an example, okay, you introduce the Shire and Frodo, you introduce Mordor, you introduce all the hobbits and stuff, but eventually you have this evil dark horse or whatever, or this ring that's calling out to other individuals. And you see all these dark figures that are coming to grab this particular ring in front of this really nice happy place, right? And so, oh no, we don't want that to happen. So they have to go off on their journey. Well, they go off on their journey and you're trying to explore some more of the films. Eventually someone else kind of comes in. You have Aragorn, right, who comes in and saves the hobbits because he can tell that there are these people that are stalking them. And so he'll take them along and so on and so forth. And they'll meet other elves. They'll meet dwarves. They'll go down through these mountains. They'll have battles and so on and so forth. But it isn't until they figure out in the Fellowship of the Ring that all of a sudden this ring has the power to destroy things. Ah, shoot. Well, we have to move to try and destroy it. And that's when you start to move your story forward. You have this event happen, and now it means something more. This event happened, it means something more. And you constantly build almost that ladder, building up till you get to the climax. And the climax of the story, when it comes to when it comes to the Fellowship of the Ring, the climax of the story is that there is only one person that can destroy this ring, and that is Frodo. He needs to be protected at all costs, even if that means he needs to be away from us. And so there's a big battle where Aragorn is like trying to keep him around, but just says, no, run. Sam, you take him, you guard him, we have to split up. And so they split up. That's the climax of the story, is that Frodo has to take care of this ring. He's the chosen one, right? And then we slowly come down from that climax of like, okay, what are Frodo and Sam going to do? How is it going to look like? How are they going to set themselves up, right? And if they're doing things correctly in this Act 3 part, this climactic part, this is where it shifts, and you have your cycle because it sets you up for other films. It's going to psych you up to the Two Towers, which is then going to psych you up to the Return of the King, and so on and so forth. Harry Potter follows almost the same line of thinking. Star Wars, the exact same thing. Fast and the Furious, almost the exact same thing. Okay, same typical story structure. It doesn't always have to be like this, but it's typically like this. Even your story throughout the day, your Snapchat story, if you want to get more followers, follow this with your posts. Show off what you're doing in the morning, who you're hanging out with. Show off some of the event that you're doing that's really exciting. Show some of the boring stuff that's happening behind there, but then show something happens in your day that changes it, and then show the consequences and what results each and every event afterwards as it continues to build up, and then build up to the most intense, exciting, important, or exciting part of your day, which is typically in the afternoon, late evening, right? 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, right in that right time range. And then go and do that thing and then stop posting. You don't need to show off what you're actually doing because at that point, people know that you're doing it and they're going to be curious. What's happening? What's going on? I need to know. And then at the end of the night, give us some resolution that came as a result of that. Don't say, oh, it sucked, because then it's like, oh, well, that's a letdown. I'm not going to follow this person again. Talk about how cool it was, and as a result of that, you end up becoming a better person, what you're going to do with it. And then cycle it to your next day. And then add that in and continue to follow the same route. right? So that's storytelling basically in a nutshell. It's actually simplistic, too simplistic in a lot of ways. And so what I'm going to have you guys start doing over the next couple days, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time to start doing this today. We're going to start our first video project. And our first video project is going to be based off of one image, right? You've heard the story, or you've heard, I guess you can say, the phrase that a picture says 1,000 words, right? And we've kind of discussed why that is today. Because images contain communication, which contains writing, which contains information that's being exchanged between individuals back and forth. A picture's worth 1,000 words. I'm going to give you guys, for your project, I'm going to give you guys an image. I'm not going to tell you where in the story it's going to start or where it's going to occur. You guys get to decide where in that story this image occurs. Imagine basically I'm playing a YouTube video and I pause the video. When I pause the video, this is the frame that I pause it on. And did I pause it at the beginning? Did I pause it in the middle? Did I pause it in the end? That's up to you to decide. And what you're going to do is you're going to end up writing a 5-page or a 5-minute story based on this one image. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you the image and give you guys the rest of class this morning to discuss it and talk about it and say, where in the world is this story going to go? Where did Sipe stop this particular video and stop at this particular point in this story? And what can we do with this? Because this image has to end back up inside of your story once we get to talking about stories and stuff later on. Okay? The only way that's going to happen is if you understand that you can put this image at any point in your story and that you can develop stories around it. Okay? Here's the image that you're going to be going with. Oops. That's where I paused. Now, what happens in this story at this point, up until this point, is up to you. What happens after this point in the story, again, is up to you. Is this paused in the beginning? Is it paused in the middle? Or is it paused at the end? Who are the characters? What is the setting? What are the events that transpired? How in the world did we get to this point in time? And so I'm going to, next time we talk about characters and you, and then talk about how we can start constructing or setting up a way to tell this particular story in a particular way. So for the rest of today, I'm going to want you guys to sit down and kind of just converse with your groups about what this story could possibly be. Throw out all the bad ideas. Usually it's about a 50-to-1 ratio, probably closer to 100-to-1. You have to throw out 50 bad ideas before you get one good idea. You have to throw out 100 bad ideas before you get to a great idea. Right? So that means that less than 1% to 2% of your ideas are actually going to be good. So you want to throw out a lot of stuff. But start thinking about what this is going to be. And then we'll start discussing it a little bit more in next class period.